Be the envy of the neighborhood. 860 KKAT, where the grass is always greener. Welcome to Gardening Utah. Here's composter and show hoster, Jana Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis. Every week here on Gardening Utah, we give you gardening inspiration and advice from experts across the state. We talk about vegetables, flowers, trees, shrubs, and of course, your lawn. Thank you for listening. I hope this show is something that you'll look forward to checking in with every week. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, Gardening Utah aims to inspire you and keep you in the know of what tasks you should be accomplishing in your yard and meet amazing, informative experts along the way. This show airs on the radio on the weekends here in Utah at 10 a.m. on 860 AM KKAT, and episodes drop every weekend on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. On today's show, we have Mark Anderson from Anderson's Seed and Garden in Logan, and we are talking tomatoes. It's going to be a full tomato clinic. So if you want to have the best tomato harvest ever this year, then this is the episode for you, and we're going to get into that with Mark in just a little bit. But I have a few shout outs that I want to give before we get into today's episode. So I first want to shout out our friends at Thrive Nursery in Lehi. Now listen, it was just a fun experience. I happened to be out in Lehi and I thought, well, geez, I should probably visit a nursery with the last little bit of time that I have. So I was able to go and check out Thrive. And the funny thing was they're listeners of the show. So they totally knew everything that's like going on with me re-landscaping my yard on one side and all that kind of stuff. So it was really fun. So shout out to everybody at Thrive Nursery in Lehi. By the way, I bought 4 trees from them and I cannot wait. I got this beautiful red bud flamethrower that is just starting to bud out and I cannot wait. So anyway, bought some gorgeous, gorgeous trees from them. If you haven't checked them out, it's huge and it's beautiful. And they're a wholesale nursery right off the freeway in Lehi. So if you're out and about that way, it's definitely worth the time to go check them out. Okay, and then last weekend, I went to a plant sale that I had just noticed on Instagram. And it was more of a group of people putting together the sale versus at a store or anything. It was in somebody's backyard. Anyway, I figured, well, I'll definitely go check it out. Main reason being that I looked at their plant list and there was a lot of cool, rare varieties that I knew I needed to pick up. And I usually get them from the Wasatch Community Garden Sale, which by the time you hear this episode will have already passed. But I'm going to New York for the weekend and taking my daughter out there to see some Broadway plays for her 16th birthday and just kind of soak up some spring in New York City, even though I just looked at the forecast and it's going to rain the whole time. So the joke's kind of on me. But anyway, knowing that I'm going to miss the Wasatch Community Garden Sale, which I typically rely on to get just a few of the extra rare tomatoes and peppers that I don't have seed for. So I noticed that this sale did have them. So I thought, okay, this is perfect. I'll just go and meet these ladies and go to their sale. Anyway, I just want to give a shout out to the darling women that put the sale on, and their plant material was incredible. Not only have they been growing it for months, but it was totally hardened off, which is unusual when you buy plants at nurseries, and obviously is an incredibly important element to a healthy plant long term. But I was able to meet the 2 beautiful women who put on the sale, and that was a lavender garden on Instagram as well as Urban Pepper Project on Instagram. And I didn't tell them that I was going to mention them, but either way, it was an awesome sale and I had so much fun buying incredible peppers and tomatoes. I bought some really rare Nicotiana, and I probably said that wrong, and snapdragons, and yeah, I bought a lot of stuff. I also saw my good buddy John Webster from Biochar. I bought a whole bunch of biochar from him so that I can get some incorporated into my yard. And I was able to get this beautiful tour of a lavender garden's yard. It was insane. It was so beautiful. So anyway, shout out to all my friends that I have met over the last little bit. Garden people are just the best people. You know, that's just the bottom line. So speaking of tomatoes and peppers, this show is all about tomatoes with Mark Anderson from Anderson's Seed and Garden in Logan. And being such a crazy tomato farmer lady that I am, I still learned some stuff from Mark today. So I'm telling you, even if you're an expert at growing tomatoes, you may learn something today you didn't know before. So we're going to get into that with Mark right after the tip of the week.
860 KKAT. with your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
My tip of the week is, it is May and it is time to mulch. May is the perfect time to mulch your garden. And now listen, I could probably do an entire show on when to mulch, the benefits of mulch, why to mulch. But let's just say, consider this your inspo to get out there and get some mulch down on the ground. And timing is really everything when it comes to mulch. Doing it too early in the season can kind of prevent the soil from warming up from the freezing temperatures that it experienced all winter. But in general, mid to late spring is mulching season, and it's the perfect time to get out there and get it done. Now, one of the obvious benefits of mulching is the ability to reduce the amount of water that evaporates from your soil, and that greatly reduces your need to water plants. So really, it is great for water retention and just overall water saving. It also improves the quality of your soil. It breaks up clay and it allows better air and water movement through the soil, and it does provide nutrients as well to sandy soil and improves sandy soil's ability to hold water. Mulch also acts as an insulating layer on top of that soil, and it keeps the soil cooler in the summer, and the roots of your plants like that. Now, why do gardeners love mulch? Well, all of those reasons I just mentioned, but also because mulch really helps keep those weeds down. Any weed seed that is on top of your soil is not going to germinate, and the weeds that do grow are much easier to pull out, and gardeners like that. Now, before you put down your mulch, make sure to weed before you do it and then water thoroughly, and this will help you get the most benefit from the mulch. Also, make sure when you do put down your mulch, keep that mulch about 6 to 12 inches away from the base of any trees and shrubs. Now, how much mulch to put down? You're going to want to do about 2 to 4 inches of mulch in all of your planting areas. If you have a really fine mulch that's maybe like a half an inch or smaller, it should be applied no more than about 2 inches deep. But if you have a really coarse mulch like bark chips, those can be applied up to 4 inches deep. Now, you may be wondering, well, what type of mulch should you buy? Well, there's really two kinds of mulch. There is organic mulch and inorganic mulch. So an organic mulch is something like chopped leaves, straw, grass clippings, compost, wood chips, shredded bark, pine needles, sawdust, and in some cases even paper. Inorganic mulches are things like black plastic, landscape fabrics, which I'm not a fan of either. Another type of mulch that you will see is maybe small rock or pea gravel. I'm not a massive fan of that because it does really heat up the plants around you, especially trees. A lot of times you will see the base, the bottom of maybe an evergreen tree that are burned, and that is partially because the rocks are absorbing heat during the day, and all the mulches for that matter. But at night, the rocks are continuing to emanate that heat, and so it really doesn't get that chance to cool down, and it can in some cases damage plants and evergreens and perennials and shrubs. So you kind of want to be careful of that, and what kind of mulch you put where. A lot of it is preference. I personally really love to use compost mulch because of the obvious benefits with regard to everything I said earlier and improving the soil, but it also creates a beautiful uniform look to the planting bed, which I love. Either way, no matter what kind of mulch you choose, get out there, get that mulch down, and you will spend so much less time this year watering and weeding. And that is my tip of the week.
And that's your Gardening Utah tip of the week, brought to you by The Advocates. If you're in an accident, you deserve an advocate. Call 801-355-5550 or visit UtahAdvocates.com. Never miss a tip for your garden and never miss an episode. The Gardening Utah Podcast with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
So, Mark, thanks so much for being back on the show. I'm happy to have you.
Oh, you know what? I had so much fun the last time. I was excited to get an invitation to come back again. So I just had to come up with an exciting topic to talk about.
Well, I feel like there's so many things that you and I can talk about all day long, as many good garden people can, right?
Yes. That's the whole thing about Anderson Seed is it's a really social place. So we have people that come in and maybe they only come in a couple times a year, but they're standing in line for seeds, and then they see a friend they haven't seen for a couple of years, and they just will stick around and just kind of visit. So really social place. Gardeners are just social people.
They really are. I went to, well, I already mentioned this on the show a little bit, but I I met some people at a garden sale over the weekend that recognized my voice. And anyway, we had a blast talking. So garden people are just the best. But
that's the fun part about it, is you just get to meet all these great people. And there's something about gardeners. They stick their fingers in the dirt. They like to work hard. They're just awesome people.
It's the truth. It's the truth. Okay, so this time of year, we're getting close to that time where it's okay to plant your tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we're talking about today, right?
Yep. It's we'll call it our tomato clinic. This is like everything you need to do to be successful with tomatoes. And there's a lot of problems that can happen with your tomatoes. You know, it's like my father has a 8,000 square foot garden. He'd always plant 30 tomatoes because he got some verticillium into his soil a few years back, and he'd always plant 30 to make sure he had 20. You know, he's always kind of planning on losing some. And so over the years, we've kind of developed a process to like be really successful with the tomatoes. And we're to the point now that if we plant 30 tomatoes in Dad's garden, we get 30 plants, and we get like 30 to 40 bushels of tomatoes, and we just don't know what to do with them all. So there's some really very critical steps along the way to be successful when you're growing your tomatoes. And it seems like everybody kind of wants to compete with everybody else. I got the earliest tomato. My tomatoes are the biggest. I produce the most. I mean, there's just a little friendly competition that goes along with it.
There sure is. In addition to that, how many plants you have, and also like what varieties you have versus so-and-so. And
yeah. So many different varieties. And, you know, there's a lot of people that are just like, all I can plant is heirlooms. All I want is heirlooms, you know, but there's so many good varieties of tomatoes out there. There's like really amazing hybrids. There's some newer hybrids that have been hybridized off of, you know, heirloom tomatoes that have just really unique flavors, but some really great disease resistance. So when it comes to tomatoes, I tell people, don't limit yourself by just saying, I'm only going to plant heirlooms. You know, it's like, there's some of the heirlooms were discontinued for a reason. You know, they have fatal flaws, kind of like, you know, your comic book superheroes. They have flaws, you know, and some are more dramatic than others. You know, there's a reason why some people quit growing some of these tomatoes, but there's some great flavors in some of the heirloom tomatoes. There's some, you know, really amazing qualities on all the varieties that are out there. So don't just get stuck planting the same thing. It's really fun to try all these different ones because there's so many different tomatoes out there.
Oh, I know. That's my favorite thing, is that I know that, okay, at the farmer's market or even at the store, even though, you know, tomatoes are just such a dramatic difference when you grow them in the garden versus buying them in the store. I mean, it's like night and day.
Oh, we've grown seeds, you know, from the same, you know, seed packet, and grown them in 3 different locations, and your soil will actually like flavor the tomatoes as well too. So it's like the exact same tomatoes grown in the same environment, planted in 3 different locations, and they don't taste the same. Because of the soil. And so this is why it's so critical when you're starting with the tomatoes that you amend your soil properly. You know, a clay soil is going to taste different from a sandy soil, is going to taste different from a silty soil. And a lot of the nutrition that you put in there is what's going to flavor your tomatoes. So all the micronutrients are really critical to have great flavor on your tomatoes. If you're lacking micronutrients, your tomatoes just don't taste as good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So let's start at the top. So somebody new to tomatoes, or maybe not new, but just really wants to have a really great harvest this year. Where do we start? And it sounds like we start at selection.
As varieties, very important, what you're going to be planting. But when it comes down to it, like the actual planting process, digging your hole is like absolutely critical, because most people will like buy their little pony packs of tomatoes, and there's like 4 tomatoes in their little pony pack, and they will dig the holes about the same size as the root ball of the tomatoes. And that's your first mistake. We want to dig that hole 3 times the size of your little root ball. So if you're doing gallon tomatoes and they're in 1 gallon pots, you're going to dig a hole that's like 16 inches across. If you're doing little pony packs and they're just like little 2-inch squares, we're going to dig a 6 or 8-inch wide hole for those. And when you take the soil out of that hole, make sure and amend it with some really good planting mix. So I'll do either a traditional potting mix, but coconut coir is great. Anything with a lot of peat moss. The tomatoes love peat moss. They love coconut coir because of the way it drains, but it also holds the right amount of moisture. And I'll just kind of work that right into the soil. So if you do like a a coconut coir, peat moss, perlite, vermiculite, potting mix that in with your soil that you're pulling out of the hole, and then like 30 to 40% even, and then plant back with that mix. Oh, your tomatoes are going to do so much better than if you do just plain old garden soil. And if you are doing them in pots, make sure you don't use garden soil. We're going to use a potting mix because a garden soil will turn into a brick in a pot and your plants are really going to struggle. So we need a really high quality potting mix, a lot of peat moss, coconut coir, all the good stuff in there, maybe a little bit of compost, but we don't want to do no steer manure. With the tomatoes, I don't do any steer manure because of the diseases that it brings with it. We're talking diseases that affect the plants, not diseases that affect you. So poultry manure, great. Steer manure, some of those verticillium and fusarium can come like straight through the steer manure. So we're very, very conscientious when we're using composts in with the tomatoes.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So that verticillium and fusarium go right through the digestive system of the animals, the cows, and it doesn't break down in there, and it just ends up right in the manure. So that's one of the ways you can really introduce some very difficult diseases to control into your garden. So once we get that hole dug, then I don't do too much manipulation with the roots. I like to take them out of the pots and just plant them just the way they are. A lot of times I'll even grow mine in not coconut coir pots or the peat pots, so I can transplant them without messing around with the roots. So we just want to leave those roots, let them do their thing. And then part of our process is we will water them with a product called Kangaroots. Are you familiar with the Kangaroots?
I am not.
Okay. Kangaroots is a natural root stimulator, comes from Fox Farm. The brand is called Bush Doctor, but it's from Fox Farm. It's a company in California. It has all the beneficial microbes and mycorrhiza and microorganisms that just get those plants going like crazy. So it makes your roots just multiply so fast. You'll have like less transplant shock. So it's an all natural root stimulator. It's called Kangaroots. It's got tons and tons of great biology in there just to build your soil back up. It's going to make your tomatoes go like crazy. But since we've been dealing with diseases in our garden, we put in another natural product that is called Complete Disease Control. It's made by Monterey. The Complete Disease Control is a bacteria, but it's a good bacteria instead of a bad bacteria. This bacteria fights off diseases like crazy. It kind of colonizes the root system of its host like a mycorrhiza would, but it needs its host to really survive. And so it's going to do everything in its power to keep its host alive. And so it fights off all these soil-borne diseases like verticillium, fusarium, works on early and late blight, a lot of these diseases that really affect the tomato plants. So we mix those two together and we water our plants with that after we get them planted. And that just really builds up some great biology in the soil, some great defense mechanisms, gets the plants to get established faster, makes the root system start to take off like crazy. And that initial planting process is so important in how your tomatoes are going to really produce for the rest of the year. So critical.
It sounds kind of like a probiotic.
It kind of is. It kind of is, because the mycorrhiza is a living organism, but it can't survive without a host. And so the Kangaroots has all that mycorrhiza, all the different strains that are in there work on the tomatoes, but the bacteria that's in the Complete Disease Control, it works the same way. And if its host is struggling, they will do everything in their power to keep their host alive, because if that host dies, then they die as well too. So they go out in search of water and nutrient, bring that to the plant, and then the disease control, it just fights all those soil-borne diseases off. So we would literally lose 5 to 10 plants every year to verticillium, and the verticillium just makes the plants just look like they're not getting watered, even though they're getting plenty of water, plenty of nutrient. It just closes up all the capillaries and all the arteries that move water and nutrient through the plant, and it'll just plug those up so it can't get there. So your plants just wilt and die and don't look very good. This will prevent that from happening, because all those diseases are present in the soil. Your plants pick it up through the soil.
Okay, so that's what. Okay, because I was going to say, tell our listeners what that looks like, because a lot of questions come in. Obviously, as you know, that's like one of the most common things aside from blossom end rot that people ask about. So.
Right. Literally, the plants look like you haven't watered them for weeks. They just start to wilt and they look terrible, but you've been watering them all the time. But the water and the nutrient is there in the soil. It just gets plugged up in the stem of the tomato where it cannot move that water and nutrient through the plant. So the plant just really wilts.
And by then it's too late, right?
Oh, it's too late. Yeah. And the disease can get spread by leaf hoppers and other insects as well too. So when a plant looks like that, usually we recommend just yank it and get rid of it so you don't end up infecting other plants. So the complete disease control in conjunction with the Kanga roots will give you that beneficial microbial activity in the soil to really get your root system going like crazy, but it's going to fight off all those diseases as well too. And then once we get them planted, I will make sure and water them really thoroughly so it will hold that moisture. Sometimes if you've got some heavier soil, a water aid would really help as well too. And this is something we really should be talking about this year since water is it's going to be a little scarce for a lot of people in the state. So anything we can do to help the soil retain moisture longer would be great. So Hydrotain is an amazing product to hold moisture, easy wet. They're basically soil penetrants, but they will get that soil to hold and absorb the moisture so it doesn't run off, and it'll hold it there longer for the plants. So we'll usually add that into the water as well too. So we get that good soil penetration with the water all the way through the plant, and then it'll hydrate up better the next time we go to water it. So, sometimes water and soil, they're kind of hydrophobic. They kind of repel each other.
Right.
And so the Easy Wet and the Hydrotain, they make it so that your soil will absorb and hold that moisture, and they don't repel each other. So it's great for hydrating the soil up properly.
And how do you feel about pruning off the bottom few leaves when you do plant it so that you can actually increase the root ball that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the tomato, there's little root hairs all along the stem. And so you can break some of those lower branches off and plant it deeper. When I was a kid, we would dig kind of a trench for some of the really tall, lanky tomatoes that nobody would want to buy. We'd take those home because, nobody wanted them. And so we'd dig kind of a trench and we just kind of put the root system in there and just lay the tomato down on its side and then just kind of turn the top up. So it would just come up a little bit, and we'd bury that whole plant all the way along there, and it will root all along that stem. And it just makes for this giant root system. More roots mean more plant, more fruit, That's why we want to focus on the roots so intensely when we first get started, because we want good, healthy root systems. By the end of the season, when I dig my tomato plants up, I literally have to use a shovel, and I'm digging, a 2-foot wide hole to pull those tomato plants out because the root systems are 2 to 3 feet across.
Oh, so wow.
It works amazing. So
that is awesome. Okay, well, we have so much more to talk about with tomatoes. We'll be right back after this on Gardening Utah. Stay with us.
860 KKAT with Jana Francis and Gardening Utah. It's the Gardening Utah Proven Winners Color Choice Shrub of the Week. Here's Cameron Alcott with Progressive Plants.
This week's Progressive Plants Proven Winners Color Choice Flowering Shrub of the Week is the Sister Redhead Scotch Broom. This is actually one of my favorite drought-tolerant plants. I think they're absolutely fantastic. The flower color on these are a brilliant scarlet color that is really rare to see on a lot of desert plants. And for a xeriscape type of design, or even if you're just trying to convert it to be a little bit more water-wise, this is a great choice. It only gets about 3 to 4 feet tall, blooms early in the spring, has a wonderful flower texture to it, and also is deer resistant. It also will tolerate salt. So for people who are on secondary water, this is actually a really good plant to use because it's very tolerant of like your salty waters that you get out of there sometimes. So if you can pick one of these up, you can get it at progressiveplants.com if you use the search term Sister Redhead, or you can just click the episode notes for the Gardening Utah episode today.
Look for the Proven Winners white containers at progressiveplants.com or at your local garden center.
We are supported by progressiveplants.com. All things plants. Visit progressiveplants.com today.
She really does have the nicest yard on the block. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and with me today is Mark Anderson from Anderson Seed and Garden in Logan, and we're talking tomatoes. Thanks again for being here, Mark.
Oh, you're so welcome. I love being on the show, and we always get to talk about fun things like gardening.
It's the best. It's the best. Okay, so let's talk about planting and frost protection, because it's still technically a little early to get your tomatoes into the ground in most areas of Utah, except for St. George. So let's talk frost protection.
Mother's Day weekend is usually traditionally, this is when we get the tomatoes planted. For us in Cache Valley, our last frost is around the 20th of May. So we usually tell people, plant early, plant often, meaning you're going to plant again. But, there's a lot of things we can do to protect those plants. And so like if you want to plant right now, go through our planting process. And then when you get those planted, maybe a little slow release fertilizer on it would be great. Tomato and vegetable food, Happy Frog tomato and vegetable food's great. There's a whole bunch of really good products out there, whether you want to go organic or if you're okay with the synthetic fertilizer, but use a fertilizer on your tomatoes. They are heavy feeders. They like to be fed. But to protect them from some cold weather that, they're predicted maybe snow on this coming Sunday. Yeah. So,
yeah,
you never know what's going to happen. So you've got some options. You've got hot caps or, frost cloth. They're going to give you about 2 degrees of added protection. So a wax paper hot cap or just a fabric frost cloth or plastic over your plants. If you do plastic or hot caps, make sure the plants do not touch the fabric.
Yes.
Right. So no touching the fabric, no touching the wax, because it'll freeze right through the fabric. So we want that air pocket between the plants and your material that's doing the protecting. So we need that air pocket because that's critical for the protection. But hot caps, plastic, frost cloth, 2 to 3 degrees maybe added protection. So instead of freezing at 32, it'll get them down into the high 20s, maybe 29 degrees. If it gets colder than that, it's probably going to get them through your hot caps. If you go to a harder plastic covering like a Grow It Now cover, those come out of Idaho. They're really neat. They come with a couple different sizes, but it's a harder plastic, and you can close the top up so it'll hold the heat in. They'll give you about 5 degrees of added protection. So this is a more opaque plastic. It's heavier, gives you a little bit more insulation value out of the plant protector. So I'll give you about 5 degrees. If you go to the extreme and go with a wall of water or an aquadome, which will hold the water in there, that water will generate it'll retain a lot of heat or release a lot of energy through the night, keep your plants protected. They're good down to about 10 or 12 degrees of frost protection. So instead of freezing at 32, it'll get you down to 20 degrees. I've seen walls of water freeze solid and the plant inside was protected still.
Whoa.
Yeah. So those tubes of water will generate a lot of energy when they freeze. When that water freezes, it releases energy. So if your wall of water is like closed up and the water inside the wall of water freezes, it'll actually heat up inside that ice, and it will protect your plant in there. So they're good down to about 20 degrees. And they increase your growth on your plants. They're amazing. They'll generate that extra heat that'll keep them warm through the nighttime, and it works great. Works great. And if you are struggling to get your tomatoes to ripen up, you can always put down weed barrier or black plastic before you plant your plants to generate some extra soil heat. And we have to do that in Cache Valley sometimes too. So before you're planting, that weed barrier, that black plastic, put it out a week or two in advance. It'll generate some serious heat in the soil, but it'll also help generate some heat in the fall to get your plants to ripen up a little bit quicker. But then putting an accelerator on there, like a wall of water or an aquadome, it will accelerate your plant's growth immensely, and you'll have more mature plants a lot quicker, and they'll start setting fruit a lot faster. So whatever it can do to warm up those nighttime temperatures makes a huge difference with your tomatoes.
I do remember in the last show that you were on, you mentioned that really at the end of the day, we can try to cheat the system and Mother Nature all we want. But at the end of the day, it's really about that soil temperature, because you're really kind of just keeping them alive until we really get to a consistent nighttime temp and soil temp.
Yep. And in September, if your tomatoes aren't ripening up, we do the same thing. Cover them with that frost cloth. It'll generate some extra heat during the day. It'll retain that extra heat through the nighttime and get your tomatoes to ripen up a lot faster. So makes a big difference. So warmer soil, warmer air temperatures at night will get your tomatoes to ripen up a lot faster.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that really, really helps. So we've gone through the process, weed barrier, dig your hole properly, amend your soil, fertilize those plants, use a mycorrhiza on them, do some disease control. Then throughout the summer, we kind of do the same thing. I'll use the Kanga roots occasionally just to encourage some extra root production. But then we go to an organic fertilizer like Universal Plant Food from Seedlingers, which is an amazing high quality organic fertilizer. Most organic fertilizers are made from composts, composted manures, so they're basically poop based.
Yeah.
This one is not. This one is soy protein based, and it smells like caramel because it's got molasses in it as well too. What? And so this is a premium organic fertilizer. It's called Universal Plant Food. It's made by Seedlingers, and it doesn't smell like poop. When it comes to organic fertilizers, they almost smell like poop. Kanga roots, it's the most horrific smelling product you've ever used, but it's amazing. This one doesn't smell like poop. It is also amazing, and the plants just absolutely love it. It's got the soy proteins in it, which feeds all those beneficial microbes and microorganisms that are now in your soil that you've just, colonized your plants with from the Kanga roots. So it's going to feed all those microbes and make them decompose nutrient. It's going to break down pesticides. It's going to break down toxins that are in your soil. We're going to feed all those microbes, which in turn feed your plants and make them grow like crazy. So the Universal Plant Food, in conjunction with the Kanga roots and the beneficial bacteria that's in the complete disease control, it will make your plants just go ballistic. They'll just grow like crazy. So we do that once about every 10 days to 2 weeks. And I'll put that disease control in there and get it all over the leaves, and then water the plant with it. So let it pick it up through the root system, but get it all over the leaves because it'll work on powdery mildew. It'll work on bacterial speck. It'll work on the black spots that get on your tomato plants as well too. So it works on all those diseases that affect the tomatoes all summer long, late and early blight, which gets into the potatoes as well as the tomatoes. It works on all those. So about every 2 weeks, a little fertilizer with the Universal Plant Food, and then the complete disease control. And before you know it, end of July is going to roll around. You're going to be harvesting red tomatoes. Your plants are going to be 6 feet tall. They're going to be 3 feet across, and your tomato cages are not going to hold your plants. They're going to be so big.
And you're going to be doing secret drop-offs on your neighbors' porches.
Yes, exactly. They're going to love it. But last year we harvested our first tomato on July 20th. But we didn't plant our plants until late. I mean, we planted them closer to Memorial Day. We didn't get anything planted till, I think it might even been after Memorial Day for some of them. Yeah. But they were producing by Pioneer Day. And by the end of the season, they were so big, they were pulling all my tomato cages down. The plants were just so big and so heavy with fruit. And so a consistent fertilization makes a huge difference. And if you are struggling with blossom end rot, drought conditions can aggravate that. Yes. Poor soil conditions can aggravate that. Cultivating too close to your plant can aggravate that. Lack of calcium or calcium that is not mobile in your soil can cause that problem. So CalMag is a really great option. It's a calcium magnesium product you can spray around your plants. I'll tell you, all the marijuana growers in California, that's what they use to get their plants to bloom like crazy is CalMag. So it's a calcium magnesium combo. It will take care of your blossom end rot and make your tomatoes bloom like crazy as well too. So that's a good supplement to use as well throughout the growing season. And then got to pick a good tomato cage. If you don't have a good tomato cage, you're in trouble. And in Cache Valley, we've got a local manufacturer here, Sunstruck Gardens. They make a product that's called Handy Cage. And the Handy Cage is a square. It's a square tomato cage. It's powder coated. It's got amazing welds on it. They come in about a 4-foot model, and then the big Handy comes in a 6-foot model. And they are big enough you can put them together on one plant. You could actually take 2 sets and make a bigger cage for your plant. And like my cherry tomatoes get a 6-footer, and they still grow up to the top of it and then back down to the ground as well too. So they're just massive. I mean, just like pick handfuls of tomatoes off those suckers. So, but the big Handies and the Handy cages, locally made right here in Utah. We've sold them for 15 years. I've never had anybody bring one back for a defective replacement. They just are built really well. They hold your tomato plants up, and they can stack them. And they are super handy. You can use them for a lot of other different purposes as well too.
I love that. And let's be honest, the tiny circular tomato cages at the end of the day, unless you've got like a dwarf variety that's like a patio variety, they're going to, especially if you use these tips that you've given today, you need a big tomato cage.
And the tomato cages that are shaped like an ice cream cone, they're built backwards. They should be wide at the bottom and narrow at the top instead of narrow at the bottom and wide at the top, because it just pulls them over.
I could not agree more.
Yeah. So with the handy cage, you can actually put them on a plant. And as the plant gets bigger, you can actually pull them away from the plant and open them up a little bit more. So it'll be more sturdy. So it'll hold the plant. And if it gets big enough, you can actually add 2 more on the other sides. So instead of having just one set of cages, you get 2 sets of cages, and you can make a much bigger square out of the 4 corners. So they're really, really versatile. But man, if you're going to be growing big tomatoes, you got to get them up off the ground. They have to be up off the ground, or else they're going to rot. And so a good tomato cage will make a huge difference. But throughout the summer, we're going to try and get those plants as big as we can. And then the first part of August, we're going to start torturing them.
Yes.
Torture those plants. So the tomatoes, if you just baby them all summer long, they think they're invincible and they're never going to die, and they just won't ripen up. So to get your tomatoes to ripen up, we have to torture them a little bit, make them think that fall's coming, that they are, they are mortal and they're going to die. And so then they think that they have to reproduce. And by reproducing, that means ripe fruit. And so first part of August, we start cutting our water back so that the plants will wilt in between waterings. We don't want them to wilt to the point where they're going to wilt and die. We just want them to really wilt at the end of the day so that we can see that they're wilting. And then when the sun goes down, if the plants don't perk back up, like right away, like if it's 100 degrees outside, they're going to wilt no matter what. Yes. But when the sun goes down, then if they perk right back up because it's cooler, then they're fine. You can let them go another day. It's when they don't perk back up when the sun goes down, that's when you want to water them. So we're going to stress them just a little bit. And I stopped the fertilizer. So no more fertilizer first part of August. We're going to start stressing them with the water first part of August. And all of a sudden your tomatoes are going to ripen up. We're going to start trimming some of the excess foliage off to get the sunlight in there to ripen the tomatoes up. So we're going to trim some of that foliage back. And then if it's getting cold in your area, like say you're up in Heber or Park City, it starts getting cold at night.
Yes,
you want to cover those tomatoes so that they will generate some extra heat during the day and retain that heat at night. You'll get them to ripen up a lot faster as well, too.
Interesting. So I realized last year I have to be pretty careful when I do prune back some of the leaves to get more sun in, because you just have to kind of do a little bit a day, because I found that sometimes my tomatoes themselves will get a little bit of sunburn on them.
Yes. Yeah. And you'll get that white spot on the fruit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's not on the bottom where the blossom end rot is, it's right on the side of the fruit. And they are susceptible to sunburn, just like you and I are. So if they've been shaded and have this big lush plant, you just trim it all back and the sun gets in there, you can definitely get some sunburn. So great point.
Yeah. So I just take it in stride. I'll go out and just do a little bit each day and just be cognizant of, and it also depends on if it's a large, like a big rainbow tomato or a cherry, a little bit of different scenario. But I realize we ought to describe to the listener what blossom end rot looks like, because some people may not realize what we're talking about. It's not necessarily what you'll see on the blossom. It's what you see on the fruit, right? On
the fruit. Yep. So you get this fruit with a sunken lighter tan or brown spot right on the bottom of the fruit. And that is where the blossom end is, and so when the fruit develops on the plant, that's right where the blossom is. And, the calcium can't quite get to the end of that fruit. So you get this sunken spot on the bottom of the plant, and you can cut it off. I mean, it doesn't really affect the quality of the fruit itself, but it does damage that section of the fruit. So you just basically have to cut that off, and they'll usually ripen a little bit faster when they get blossom end. But it does affect your production and your harvest as well too. So it's good to get that kind of taken care of early on in the season. And it happens a lot on people who have tomatoes in planters, like in raised beds or in containers, because the soil is different. The soil is just different in those containers than it is out in your garden. So if you're not supplementing those plants with some calcium, there is no calcium in that soil. And so that will definitely be a problem if you're doing pots if you're doing big planters, if you're doing raised beds, we really have to supplement with some calcium, because our soil in our garden is kind of calcium based. There's a lot of calcium out there, but in the raised beds and in the planters, there's not. It's
Absolutely.
just not either. Yeah.
Yes. And, blossom end rot can be a sign. I mean, essentially, it is just a sign of a stress response, a gibberellin response, if you will, to the conditions, which can be inconsistent watering, and that kind of thing.
And drought conditions,
Yes.
serious heat like we had last year for sure. So,
Yes.
and some varieties are a little bit more susceptible to it, and cracking especially. So if you get the cracking on the tomatoes. So
I had a horrible problem with cracking last year, but it was because of the 2 massive rainstorms that we got.
Yeah.
That what it really happens, it just basically explodes the tomato, because all of a sudden the plant has so much moisture it has to absorb.
And then it's growing faster than the elasticity of the skin can handle it. So what's your favorite tomato?
Wow, whichever one I have in my hand. So I could never, it's like picking my favorite child. But that being said, I have different favorites for sauce tomatoes than I do for, table eating.
Yep, absolutely.
Like gross. And I have different flavor, favorite cherries. But I would say if I had to pick an all around, oh my gosh, I can't do it. I can't do it.
Yeah.
I literally can't do it.
Yeah. For cherry tomatoes, we plant Sun Sugar.
Okay.
We plant Sweet Baby Girl, which is getting harder to find because the seeds are less available. And we plant a black cherry. And so we can have kind of a medley of cherry tomatoes. So we'll pick those and it's got all the different colors in there. So that's really fun. For Roma type tomatoes, if you're doing paste or sauce or salsa, probably the best one we've ever grown is called Optimax. And the Optimax is a huge Roma. It's really, really big. I would say it's probably 3 to 4 inches long and 2 inches across. So it's a large Roma tomato, and the seed's readily available, but you don't see many people grow the plant. So you have to grow that one yourself. And that's definitely one of our favorites. But then there's some really great old fashioned Italian ones like Principe Borghese and oh shoot, what's the other one? San Marzano are really good too.
Yeah. So my tomato garden mostly consists of sauce tomatoes. So I've usually got 4 or 5 different San Marzanos going at a time. Maybe 1 or 2 different varieties, some just different offshoots, and some are a little bit larger than regular.
Yeah.
And then my favorite overall sauce tomato that I've tried so far is a Goldsman Italian, but that is really hard to find the seed. But I've been saving the seed every year, and that is actually exceeded my flavor expectations, even over the San Marzano. But
awesome.
It has really weird intricacies, though, in that it's an heirloom, so it's not perfect. So sometimes there's not really consistency in how it grows, but
misshapen sometimes. And
exactly. Or inside it has some really big like air pockets that sometimes you'll find mold when you're cutting into them. So, or not mold, but it just doesn't look right. So you have to be careful when you can it, but the sauce is the best I've ever tried. But I think overall, for canning, I love, a Celebrity, a Moscow. Yep. I think those are excellent for not just table eating, but for a good canning tomato, not for sauce as much as just, making just tomatoes,
tomato juice and all that stuff. Our favorites would have to be, we plant Pink Girl. Pink Girl is a really mild flavored pink tomato. My dad's favorite is called Brandy Master. It's a cross between a Beef Master and a Brandywine. And it's a huge pink tomato, and it's just got really, really mild flavor. Cherokee Purple, we plant Purple Boy, which is a new hybrid variety. That's a purple tomato, really nice quality. For an early tomato, Jet Star, Jet Set, they're really early but big and nicer quality than, say, like an Early Girl. And for just a good all-around tomato, probably Big Beef, Celebrity, Better Boy. They just are hard to beat. Every year they just produce and produce and produce, just great quality all the time.
And they're disease resistant and they're kind of proven. And, my opinion would be, if you are new to tomato gardening, then you're going to want to stick to the hybrid, don't you think?
Yeah. They're more forgiving, more disease resistant. They're really productive. Big Beef just had a kind of an upgrade to it. So it's now called Big Beef Plus, and it's got extra sweetness. So its Brix index is a little bit higher. So it's a sweeter, much more disease resistant plant. So that's going to be an awesome choice. So there's a Big Beef Plus, a Better Boy Plus, and a Celebrity Plus that just came out this year that are all really amazing fruits. We got a sample last year and we got to try them. They were awesome. So
I'm going to have to look into those. I haven't heard of the Plus thing, so I'm definitely going to look into that. Well, look, you gave us so many amazing products. So listeners will have all the links and notes to everything that Mark mentioned in the episode notes. And you know what, Mark? We're going to have you back when it's around harvest time. So, because that's an additional show all about
whole nother show. Yep. And the tomato process, I've got a video that covers it all too. So if you want a step by step, it's perfect for that. So
okay, I'll put that in the episode notes too. Mark, thanks so much for being here on Gardening Utah.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for the invitation. It is always a pleasure.
When you're ready to grow big or go home, make your neighbors green with envy. Get the Gardening in Utah podcast, Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden.
ProgressivePlants.com, experts at helping you choose the perfect and unique plants that will thrive in your location. Progressive Plants is passionate about helping homeowners, expert gardeners, novices alike choose the correct plant for your soil. They don't just grow plants, they know plants. Let Progressive Plants help you today. Just go to ProgressivePlants.com and check out their wide selection. You can also go to the Design tab and look at the expert designers that they have that can help you plan your perfect yard. Visit ProgressivePlants.com today. Steals.com has an amazing selection, all at prices up to 70% off. Your shopping destination is just a click away at Steals.com, but don't delay. The daily Steal changes every day at 9 a.m. You'll find everything for kids, for women, and the home. Everything you'd need to throw a great birthday party, gifts for friends, women's shoes, furniture for the home, and more. Steals.com is the perfect destination to have gifts delivered right to your door. Be inspired by Steals.com, where you can discover thousands of special items, all at amazing prices. At Steals.com, women are having fun discovering something new every day. It's a must-have for busy moms. Download the mobile app and make it easy to shop on the go. Now it's your turn. Discover new selections and unbeatable prices. Shop Steals.com and start saving today. Steals.com, Steals.com.